Of course, the most reliable protection from psychiatrists remains the Kremlin wall. Every single time that Vladimir Putin speaks publicly, he invariably adds some new, previously unknown shade or nuance to his ongoing diagnosis of the situation. This time, it was so-called compulsive lying, which is usually associated with mythomania, with pseudologia. And that's in addition to his sadistic disorder. It's clear that he's incredibly dull, but who feeds him the nonsense he voices is a complete mystery. The fact is, every one of Putin's speeches is a fireworks display of absolutely unbelievable dishonesty. But the fact that he always lies is known to everyone. He could quite easily claim the undeniable title of the planet's foremost and most prominent chief charlatan. However, all his extensive military political ramblings and pronouncements might, in fact, actually be entirely justified, because the cunning dictator meticulously uses them to skillfully mislead his numerous enemies and effectively energize his loyal subjects. But why on earth does he muddle things up in areas where he doesn't understand anything at all? Historical, everyday, or practical matters. It's completely incomprehensible. After all, everything is so easy, so elementary to verify. Putin stated at the Valdai Forum that passports of the Russian Empire did not have a nationality field. This was, once again, a pure and utter brainwashing of the unsuspecting public, because he was explicitly shown two very local peasant passports, which didn't even allow them to travel outside, not just the immediate province, but even their own immediate serfdom. This manipulation was quite evident. The fact is, of course, there was a nationality field. Oh, there absolutely was. And it was recorded in the strictest possible way. Moreover, the passport holder's original name was forcibly Russified, a common practice during that historical period. We can, for instance, look at the famous and historically significant passport that was officially issued to the renowned draftsman Giacomo Petrulli as a clear example. And it says, the bearer of this document is Engineer Lieutenant Yakov Yuriev, son of Petrulyov, of the Italian nation, son of a staff officer. And then follows a description of when he was assigned to service and the official stamp. It was absolutely mandatory to clearly indicate nationality, of course, specifically for all Jews. Of course, because the local police were required to strictly ensure that Jews lived only in permitted areas and never beyond them. And in passport booklets, Jews were usually in the passport booklets of the Russian Empire, they were marked with the word Žid. Passport markings were just as meticulous for so-called Tseganini, that is, Roma, Moldovans, and so on and so forth. In general, the history of passports in Russia is mysterious and murky. Originally, passports were something issued only to foreigners, and a little later, passport booklets were introduced for other categories as well. In any case, Putin has given us yet another reason to laugh at him. But as a rule, he isn't even aware of it. He is so narcissistic and self-absorbed that he spouts any nonsense at all, with about the same enthusiasm. For example, he was presenting awards to teachers, for things like Teachers' Day and so on. And Putin is genuinely very pleased with the results of the work of Russian teachers. And here it must be said he is right. The schools have done an enormous and, most importantly, successful job. It's not as easy as it might seem at first glance to turn ordinary boys into thoughtless killers, ready to wipe out an entire people at the command of a deranged dictator. But the teachers, as they say, made an effort and raised a generation incapable of understanding the vileness of what they are doing and what they are involved in. You see, the Soviet system in its final years was not all that toxic. By that time, the Cheka had decayed and weakened, and the ideology had run out of steam. And the population raised by this fading USSR was, well, a bunch of cheerful vegetables concerned only with getting their hands on scarce goods. And the next generation, well, it got poisoned by the freedom of the 90s and was completely devoid of any qualities at all. And it took a titanic effort to turn the population into a dumb and very aggressive mass. And it must be said, they succeeded. Of course, propaganda played its part, but all those kind-hearted Mary Ivans also made their most important contribution. And by the way, it was precisely they who ensured the success of election fraud back when there was still some need for such fraud. I have very little doubt, indeed, that now the thoroughly brainwashed populace really does vote exactly as the utterly deranged Pamfilova emphatically claims. But it's hard to say who deserves more credit for the fact that 80% of Russians have been turned into expendable material for the madness of propaganda, elections, Putin, or the school system. I think that in just a couple of years, any involvement in the special military operation will become a deadly, shameful stigma. And in all likelihood, those who turn people into orcs certainly deserve the same stigma. The main thing is that they have enough courage to wear this stigma as proudly as they now intend to wear all those trinkets and certificates they've received from Putin.